Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Overseers. My name's Roilios, and I'm joined as usual by my co host Nightwing. We are just a couple of days uh, earlier than the Summer Showdown, and we are going to be going over a few roster moves and then talking about all of the teams that have qualified for the Summer Showdown from each region. So, as some of you will already know, there are going to be four teams playing from APAC and eight teams playing from NA, each in their respective regions. So, we will have two separate winners for the Summer Showdown tournament. Alright, without further ado, let's just get right into it with the first roster move, which is that the NYXL recently hired an assistant coach called Artist, who was seemingly a coach for the NYXL before as well. And he spent some time in contenders with Talon Esports, done actually some really good work with them, and now he's back coaching in Tier 1. So, all in all, like a pretty good signing, I guess, because I think they do need more coaches right now because they've undergone a few coaching changes, especially with Kuki not being part of the team anymore. So I think this will be a good addition, especially because it's a Korean coach again with like really good contenders experience. So that should help the team out a bit as well.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, Kuki not being there, I think, has affected the NYXL somewhat. I don't think I'm still impressed by whatever Gesture is bringing to the table just because of how poor NYXL's performance has been. So it's really undying that the team has been looking for support. And I think it's a really good move for them to bolster their ranks by getting artists in. He's obviously, like you said, coached a few good teams and has decent experience. So this might help the NYXL towards the tail end of the season.
Yep. And I feel like at this point, a bunch of kind of unsuccessful teams are definitely taking a good long look at their non-player lineup, I guess. So just like the NYXL, there have been some coaching changes with the Boston Uprising. So first of all, they have let go of Laurie, who was their head coach, and they've appointed Ascoft as the head coach for the time being. And they've confirmed that he will remain the head coach for the rest of the season. And along with that, their assistant coach Baroy has left the team and has joined the Vancouver Titans as a general manager. So that's actually, I guess, three different roles that Baroy has played in the past 3 years because he was earlier, I guess, an analyst for the Defiant, then he became an assistant coach for the Uprising, and now GM for the Titans. So, a man wearing many hats should be exciting for him as an individual. He certainly does have the experience to help these teams, and I guess along with Repay, they can probably help this team become a little bit more well-rounded. Because I think management and coaching are both what the Titans were lacking, and we can already just see a big difference in the team with Deepay now coaching the roster. So I think this should be a good addition to them in general.
Yeah, I think the Titans have finally taken a good look at themselves, like you said, Prolius, and they are kind of making the right moves. Uh, Obviously, I don't really know, Borai's qualifications as a GM, but considering the previous state of the team, he can hardly do worse, I feel. Um, and yeah, I think this team is stepping up, and they've probably, vetted him quite thoroughly. Uh, I have some level of respect for Boroi just because, he was one of the pioneers of just collecting a bunch of data ever since the beginning of uh, sort of the inception of Overwatch with the Winston's lab. So I think this is a pretty good team, team move for the Vancouver Titans.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's more so going to hurt the Boston Uprising to have lost him as well as I guess Laurie no longer being on the lineup. Although I mean they did make that decision for themselves. I think letting Laurie go might have been not the right call at this stage because you're already more than halfway into the season, and I think right now you should be focusing on polishing up your patching up your holes rather than trying to just completely revamp the strategy that your team is taking. I think by adding Mag to the lineup, they made a really good move because even though it feels weird to have Mag in this lineup all of a sudden, he is a pretty good Junker Queen, so it is helping out the team in this meta. And I think Lori was probably responsible for that pickup, so I think it might have been a mistake to let him go right now. Obviously, you do still have a bunch of Korean players on the roster. You know, Valentine and Faith are two of the players that Lori brought with him when he got signed to the team. Um, and now they are here with a new head coach, which I don't know how it's going to work out. Like, I don't know how different Ascoft's coaching style is compared to Lori's, but it just seems like a confusing move. And although the uprising can't be in much worse of a position right now, I think it would have been safer to let Lori be till the end of the season at least.
I feel like really the Boston Uprising were not in a great position either way because they've just never shown very great results. Um, Honestly, I think the only thing I have to say about Boston that might be remotely interesting, since they've basically almost lost their chance to become like relevant to any degree for the final playoffs of the year. I think I would love to see Peggy, who's sort of being hinted at to like getting a contract on some team. I'd love to see him come in and try and replace Punk as the mainstay tank, and then just get rolled again, just like every other tank on the Boston Uprising has been. But apart from that, I think Boston is just kind of irrelevant, to be honest. Ascroft has shown, no real results with the Boston Uprising, which is the only, the only Overwatch League team he's worked with. So I don't really see how this will change anything because there's no new faces coming in. Overall, I think I honestly just don't really care about this move.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Um, I think another thing that we need to talk about just briefly is Karif stepping down as the Florida Mayhem's assistant coach. I mean, there's honestly not much to talk about with this move because we didn't really know what he was bringing to the roster. I haven't really heard anything about Karif's coaching, so it's hard for me to make any significant comments about this. Um, Maybe I think the only influence he might have had over the team is this double flex support strategy that the Florida Mayhem have been running in this Junker Queen meta, which is quite unique. I think we've only seen at most a couple of teams running the Ana Zen with the Junker Queen. So Karif might have had some influence over that because he used to play flex support. But other than that, I don't think it's going to affect the team a bunch because I think Gunba is still going to be kind of leading the charge on the strategy for this team.
Yeah, I think Gunba is definitely the one holding the reins for this team, and you could see this in the recent interview he actually had with the desk. And the Florida Mayhem do have realistic expectations at this point. They're not exactly trying to just be at the very top team because they know that they cannot, but they're trying their best and they have a decently organized system behind them, even if they have been faltering here and there. I think whether Karev has left or not is not super relevant. He could, like you said, have provided some feedback to the double flex support comp, but I think Florida has got that down to the degree that they can. It's not the meta, so eventually they'll be found out and exploited for having that weakness in that area. So I think the Florida Mayhem will just carry on as usual.
Yep. And I think that's enough about the roster moves. We can now start talking about each of the teams that have qualified for the summer showdown. Starting off with the fourth seed in the Philadelphia Fusion. Now, the Fusion are always a very like an interesting team to talk about because although they have got really high skill ceilings as individuals, they don't often gel well together, and that's what makes this team kind of inconsistent. So seeing them in yet another tournament, it's really interesting. And I mean, I'm keen to hear your thoughts first on this, Nightwing. What do you think are the Philadelphia Fusion's chances at actually doing well in this tournament?
I think this year's Philly is a real wild card. Sometimes you see them playing like the absolute elite uh, at times in APAC, and sometimes you just see them biting the dust completely. So it's really hard to predict what this team is doing. But either way, you know that you can always count on the Fusion fans' copium to make the matches interesting and make a decent narrative, and eventually end up with memes regardless of the outcome. But the Fusion right now is just not doing very hot. They've gone to some map fights with some teams and then faltered at the last moment. And teams, especially like the Guangzhou Charge, which we're going to talk about next, uh, which I think is kind of sad for a team like Philly, because they do definitely have good pieces, like you said, Prolios. It's just that I feel like the coaching is honestly not quite there. Uh, in my opinion, I don't really see the same kind of efficiency that the Philadelphia Fusion of old in the previous years would have in sort of executing compositions. I feel like this team is just not gelling very well, especially maybe between the tanks and the DPS and the tanks and the supports as well. Because while MN3 and Zest can try and make plays here and there, you can sub in Carpe to get a few headshots in. It's not really a consistent strategy at this point, considering how matured the league has become and how team dependent the quote unquote Jotes comp is. So I think that's where the Philadelphia Fusion is faltering, because you can't just count on Zest getting a 3K pulse bomb anymore, considering the meta is what it is at the moment. Uh, so I think that's where the Philly Fusion is kind of failing.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like a lot of teams are mentioning, right? It's just like Pelican go kill 5 or Proper go kill 5. It's just kind of like Zest go kill 5 or MN3 go kill 5 for the Fusion. Um, I think the DPS line is definitely the most consistent part of the Philadelphia Fusion roster. They did see some issues when Carpe was in on the Sojourn instead of MN3. But then when MN3 got back into the lineup, you saw significant improvement, right? Because like there's just star potential about that guy. He's been popping off quite frequently in this season, and it's quite pleasing to see. But I think his teammates, especially the support line, really needs to step it up, because I see Fixa often playing a really sloppy Lucio. He's like wall riding in front of enemy sojourns and just gets instantly picked off, and that's just not a good look. It not only makes your entire team look bad, but obviously costs you games. There are real stakes. Um, I think if the support line fixes their problems, the Fusion can actually, maybe make the finals if they play consistently. Although I don't think it's very likely. I do have to give props to Fury for being a pretty good Junker Queen. He has some nutty knife throws, which end up getting his team picks during the darkest of times. And naturally, in addition to the consistent DPS line, it's good to have a consistent Junker Queen out there. So all in all, even though the Fusion I think are good, they are the fourth seed, and like if it were up to me, yeah, I would put them at the fourth seed as well, because even though they have had some really good peaks, kind of similar to maybe the Soul Dynasties level, I think they're the most inconsistent of the lot, and realistically, I see them having an early exit in this tournament. But yeah, let's talk about the third seeded team as well, which is the Guangzhou Charge. And the Guangzhou Charge are an interesting one, because prior to this tournament, they haven't really been competitive at all. Right now, we are seeing like a step up in the roster because of the new players that they've signed. They've got Xerneas on the Lucio, they've got Jimmy playing Hitscan, and he's doing surprisingly well. And they've also got Farway and Choisawan, who are also consistent players, and naturally Krong, who is like a mechanical beast, and he's actually kind of uh, back back to like a similar level to which he used to play back in season 3 or season 4. So I think Krong no longer being kind of a slouch is helping out the team as well. But once again, realistically, even though they are competitive, and I do think they are better than the Fusion at this point, just because of higher consistency, I don't think they're going to make it to the finals at all. That will be left to our top two contestants. What are your thoughts on the Charge, Nightwing?
I think I definitely love the improvement. This team is not just an instant sleeper anymore. Like you said, they've signed some really good pieces that have actually elevated the team. They've cut off some dead weight. Cough, cough, cough. Any main tanks. But yeah, I think the Guangzhou Charge are at least heading in the right direction. I don't think they have what it takes to definitively take the win this time, because I think the top two teams that are seated above them are better. But there's always the odd chance in APAC that you like end up with everyone beating everyone again, and that just tends to happen at times. But I don't think I would count on Shanghai and Seoul dropping the spaghetti uh, against Guangzhou Charge, especially. That said, I do like that they've actually become a competitive team and not just something to not even bother watching the VOD for.
Oh yeah, for sure. And yeah, I think with that we can talk about the top two teams in the region. The second seeded team in the APAC region are the Seoul Dynasty. And this might come as a surprise to some of you because the Seoul Dynasty have been evidently the best team in APAC overall. Um, naturally, they have been challenged and even beaten by the Shanghai Dragons recently. But all in all, let's just collect our thoughts about Seoul for a minute. And I'd like you to just tell me, Nightwing, what do you think is like the key for Seoul to actually kind of win this tournament, because the Shanghai Dragons are evidently the favorites at this point in time.
Uh, Maybe just my shock fan bias, but I think Smurf just has to flick their heads probably and slash their heads. I guess he's a good player. I think the Seoul Dynasty have been playing incredibly well so far, with a few slip ups against Philly where they went 3-2, which I didn't really like, and they got rolled by the Shanghai Dragons. But apart from that, they've been pretty consistently good, and I think they just have to keep it up and find those little nuances that you get. For example, if you remember in season two, you just kept seeing goats every single match, but you could see as the season went on that there were these little nuances in how each character would position, how they would play, which characters they would focus and try to kill. Uh, and these sort of nuances, I obviously don't have Overwatch 2 yet, but this is something that the Soul Dynasty just has to outcoach themselves into understanding and execute on that together as a team, because this is a really obviously team reliant composition. Uh, but apart from that, I don't really know what else Soul can do.
Yeah, I think all in all, the Seoul Dynasty have got what it takes to win this tournament. Uh, I feel like even though the Shanghai Dragons are the favorites, I have in my personal bracket, I have put the Seoul Dynasty as the winners, and the reason for that is pretty straightforward. I feel like the Seoul Dynasty learned from their mistakes a bunch. Historically, we have seen the dynasty adapt to different situations. Like we saw them a few times, playing Stalker, for example, over Profit. They realized that that's just not working out, and then they just stopped playing Stalker until they needed like Profit to play the Brig. Even though these are like very silly sounding adjustments, the Soul Dynasty do end up making them. I think they are also really good at making team specific strategies. Like usually in the Jotes comp, we don't tend to see a lot of variation in strategy from teams, but you can see the dynasty doing one very interesting thing, which is against each team they kind of choose one player to focus down, and like they just focus on killing that one player every single fight, and that generally works out well for them. Like when they played against the Shanghai Dragons, for example, that player was Lip, and for a while they were consistently picking him off until the Dragons themselves adapted, which is like a different discussion to be had when we talk about the Dragons. But all in all, there's not a single player I dislike on the Soul Dynasty in this meta. Like none of them are making silly mistakes. All of them understand their roles. All of them are mechanically talented, and I think they definitely have what it takes to pull it off. Because all in all, like let's not forget, even though the Dragons are challenging them, the Soul Dynasty have been the most consistent team throughout this season. So I think if they can just hold it together, look back at what went wrong in their match against Shanghai, they can definitely counter the Dragons and take home the series. But I mean, it is a big ask because the Dragons are also looking really good. But before we talk about them, I'll get your thoughts on Seoul as well, Nightwing.
Yeah, I think I
I
would
mean,
like to
versus the
just
Dragons. Obviously, you did talk about
yeah
the team, but
yeah I got it. My heart goes out to Vindime. I mean, the poor guy has to contend with Lee Jae-gon for this top spot as the like best APAC Lucio, and he's doing a pretty darn good job of it. Honestly, like he's not making any huge mistakes, like you said, Prayas. All the players on Soul are incredibly solid, so I can definitely see like Soul having like a huge potential to actually take the win. Almost likely, if you look at the like total standings of the year, uh, I think there are some ways in which Shanghai can also edge it out, but it's going to be a really fun just battle to the top. I think, regardless of whoever ends up winning. I think these teams are pretty close, to be honest, despite them getting 3-0'd recently. Even that match was fairly close. I think it just depends on which team has taken this little bit of downtime to prepare better and just figure out which strats actually work very well with the current meta.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's like you're you're putting up two of the best teams in the region against each other, and I think that's probably the most exciting match possible. And like I mentioned earlier, like Seoul is really good at like preparing strategies for their matches, but the Shanghai Dragons have this special thing where they are really good at adapting mid-game. I don't think I've seen any other team do that. That's what makes them so scary for even like a strategically sound team like the Seoul Dynasty to go up against. Like you could see that the moment they realize that the Dynasty are focusing down Lip every fight, Lip was just playing further back every single time. He was not off angling as much. He was playing more behind hard cover, more behind his Junker Queen, more alongside his Brig. Like you could see those adjustments, and like naturally the guy has got some of the best mechanics on Sojourn in the world. So you can see him just simply getting value out of that. So I think all in all, it makes sense for the Dragons to be the favorites here, right? Because they have been the most consistent team in this meta, even though not throughout the season. And they've got some of the most mechanically cracked players. Like, who are you? Like a Genji specialist. He's been playing really well. Void has been playing a solid Junker Queen, although not the cleanest, but really good still. Lee Jae gone naturally. He's been playing a hyper aggressive Lucio, which, like, aggression really suits this meta because just like goats, like the moment you kill, let's say, two or three players, Lee Jae just goes in, gets all the stragglers along with who are you. It's just really like fantastic to see. Like there are a lot of stylistic differences between these two teams and a lot of different like strengths and weaknesses. So no matter who wins, I think it's going to be a really close and a really banger of a match. Like even though you saw the Dragons, beat the Dynasty 3-0 this past week, it wasn't a one-sided affair. Like the Dynasty did make some really good plays and had some really good strategies. So yeah, it's just going to be a fun experience to watch in general. Any final thoughts about the APAC Summer Showdown Tournament, Nightwing?
Yeah, I think one thing that I will have to hand to the Shanghai Dragons is I still believe in their coaching staff much more than I do the Seoul Dynasty. I'm sorry, I had a lot of respect for Toby as a player, but I'm despite the results, I still need some more time to, even consider putting him above Moon and the system he has around him. I think the Shanghai Dragons are simply more disciplined. They can be reined in even if they are, mechanically cracked. Like you say, they have solid fundamentals and a system to go along with it. And we've seen consistently in Overwatch League that whichever team has these systems set up, these sort of hierarchies put in place, these are the teams that perform the best. Back when even Kuki was, coaching the Florida Mayhem, when he had the system in place, the Florida Mayhem were doing pretty well. But over time, obviously, that sort of broke down. But you can see with the shock that the same thing has been happening is because Krusty has a system around him, especially when he gets those assistant coaches that he's used to working with. And with Moon, it's obviously his set of assistant coaches as well, and he's got Pavane with him as well. That really just makes a big difference, I feel, in making those mid-match adjustments, which I think the Seoul Dynasty find a little bit hard to counter, just because Toby doesn't have that experience to try and turn a match around in the middle of it. So that's something that I will have to definitely give to the the Shanghai Dragons. is that they've got that system to fall back on. But I still think it's going to be really, really interesting to see who comes out on top.
Oh yeah, for sure. And yeah, I think on that note we can move on from the APAC region and start talking about the NA teams. All right. In the NA region, we've got 8 teams that have qualified for the tournament, and the first one is going to be our 8th-seeded team, the Florida Mayhem. Now, the Mayhem are a very interesting team because they are one of like 2 or 3 teams that have played double flex support alongside Junker Queen in this meta. Like we are typically seeing Brig Lucio being the support line, but the Florida Mayhem have dared to pull out the Ana Zen composition, which suits Rupal and Somajet's strengths. Um, Obviously, since they're both flex support players, and it's not always worked out for them. Like even though they claim that it throws off a few teams to not scrim against Anazen but run up against that composition in an official league match, it throws them off. But I think we would have seen the Mayhem have more success if that were true. So I think all in all, even though the team is like all right, I don't think they've got what it takes to advance too much in the tournament. They do have a bunch of really good pieces. I think mainly like Hydron, who has been brought back into the lineup after he was benched for XZ to get a chance. I think he has evidently been the best player and one of the best sojourns in the NA region. Regardless of how successful the team is. But the other members on his team aren't exactly doing very well. Like someone hasn't been playing a great Junker Queen. Somajed and Rupal don't really look fantastic on main supports. Like Somajed Lucio has been horrendous, like as a lot of us have seen. And like just on a side note, Somajed is not going to be able to travel to Hawaii. Like the team just put out a tweet saying that like an hour ago or so, I think. Either way, it's not going to affect too much because his Lucio is as bad as can be anyway. No offense to him, but yeah, he's really good at flex support and you can't compare his main support to that. So yeah, don't see the Mayhem going too far. They will be competitive though, but yeah, what are your thoughts on the team, Nightwing?
Yeah, I don't know whether or not Sormajet can go to Hawaii, but he definitely cannot go to Toronto based off of the announcement.
My bad,
But
Toronto.
yeah,
My bad.
yeah. That said, I mean, yeah, Surmajat has not been doing great. I think in the last tournament cycle, there was a stat that was put out is that Surmajat is literally the player with the highest deaths per 10 minutes, like by far. Nobody is even close to the amount of deaths that he has. So, I'm honestly not sort of surprised that the survivability of Lucio, just kind of one of the main strengths of Lucio, is just not being exploited by Surmajit, who dies so much. Obviously, that's only one part of Lucio. There's a whole teamwork dynamic to Lucio that isn't there as much in other supports. That said, yeah, the Florida Mayhem definitely do have a really good tool with Hydron, and I really love that he's being brought back in. I think the Florida Mayhem are sort of the protagonist of this year's league, to be honest. You've got the evil dominators in teams like Shock and Dallas, which just keep on winning. But then there's the Florida Mayhem, which are the only team that's actually trying to make the league fun to watch instead of just a Jorts versus Jorts matchup all the time. So this time they've come up with double flex support. And if you remember at the beginning of the year, they had the fun sort of Monte Carlo teleport strategy. So it's Florida Mayhem just trying to make the Overwatch League more fun and try to increase the viewer count at this point, where every other team is just trying to put the viewers to sleep, which I can definitely appreciate, and I respect that. That said, competitively speaking, I think this team is a little bit out of their depth at the moment. They looked good at the beginning of the year. I definitely loved how flexible someone was, but because he hasn't really mastered any of these tanks, let alone Junker Queen in particular, which is dominating this meta, the Florida Mayhem is definitely reaping the consequences of that. So I think they're just not in a great position to try and win this. But as Gunbar said, they've got realistic expectations. The players are happy that they've made it this far. Many of them are rookies, or some of them have just been perma benched, or not given their role like checkmate. So I think the Florida Mayhem are still happy with their progress.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I think we can move on from this team and talk about our seventh seed. All right, our seventh seed team are the Washington Justice. And it's an exciting time to have them in the tournament because we finally see this team going up against the Dallas Fuel in the very first match of the tournament. And we'll see if Decay is happy at the end of it or not. But yeah, seriously, talking about this team in general, I think it's once again an interesting one because I feel like the Justice have had some really high highs during these qualifiers. They've like a lot of their good moments have come off the back of Decay, who has been like just a really nutty sojourn, especially with the railgun shots. I think in addition to that, Kalios has been a surprisingly good Junker Queen as well. He's not like a really, you know, showy playmaker, but he does what needs to be done for the team, always understands where to position, which abilities to use, how to control the tempo of the fight, and naturally there's Assassin who's really good at cleanup. So all in all, this team is quite, like quite competent in this meta. But once again, I think they're going up against some absolute like behemoths. So I don't think they'll be able to make it quite deep into these playoffs. Like I think the biggest weakness is the lackluster support line, because I mean they've got opener playing the Lucio consistently, but they haven't been able to figure out that brig role yet. No matter if Vigilante or I mean Vigilante is no longer on the team, but no matter whether he played it or Krillin played it, it just didn't sort of fit in with the team. Like, and especially Krillin is a noticeably like weaker brig player than Vigilante was. So like you can notice that weakness on the team. And in general, because of that, I don't think it's going to be a very deep playoff run for the Washington Justice.
Yeah, I think the support line is just not, very strong, like you said, and that is sort of the cornerstone of this comp. Is That's why they call it Jotes, is because the Lucio and the Brig are providing that goats like survivability. And if you're just not able to play those roles effectively, if you're not able to, deny space as well as provide that speed boost, provide a lot of tankiness at the same time with lots of passive healing and AoE healing, then the point of the entire comp is sort of moot. And honestly, I don't really love Kalios's Junker Queen either. I think when they had Magan, he was doing all right, but Kalios is just sort of filling in. He's had a few plays here and there, but I'm still not completely convinced, to be honest. I think that obviously you can't rely on Decay to just have these pop-off moments here and there. He is like a really talented player, and that's very well reflected in his massive salary. But I feel like the Washington Justice is just not in the right mindset either. I think they had some sort of a falling out with their general manager Pre a few days ago, with some sort of Twitter drama. I'm not really sure. I think that's been resolved now, but they've put him in a sort of remote role. I don't think the team is really in the best managerial state at the moment, from what I can gather. Competitively, they have been doing better than they have in multiple years, I would almost say. But I still feel like there are definitely much better teams out there.
And yeah, I think on that note, let's move on to our sixth seeded team, which is gonna be a bit of a pleasant surprise for some of you. All right, in sixth place we've got the Vancouver Titans, and like Canadians fans rejoice because we've got not just one but two Canadian teams in this tournament. It's a really like it feels really nice to have the Titans in this kind of tournament cycle, because we haven't really seen them having a lot of success in this season because they were still being coached by Flubby and Pew, who have produced no results for the greater part of 2 years. So Deepe coming in has definitely reinvigorated the roster. I think he's used some of the experience he had coaching the Gladiators during the Goats era in like helping the team understand macro fundamentals, and that's evidently showing. Especially with Massa being like such a proficient Lucio player and a shot caller, like you can definitely see the difference. And I can also see that Mirror has also stepped up, like being in almost like a leadership position, having a very vocal role on the roster. And obviously the pop-off potential of Aspire, who is like one of the few players in NA who consistently plays the Ashe over the Sojourn. Although yeah, we see like a good bit of Sojourn as well. So I do like the fact that this team is here. I do think they had some really good games during the qualifiers. Do I think they can win the tournament? Absolutely not. Like they are far too inconsistent to like um, put any bets on, and they didn't really have a like difficult strength of schedule. So although I think they had some really good peaks, I don't think they're going to be going too far into these playoffs. You know, like that's like I know like no credit to be stolen from players like Aspire, King, or Mirror. Like they are all playing really well. Like even the support line, especially Masa, is doing really well. But it's just a matter of difference in caliber. I think that's all there is. Otherwise, I think the Titans should be proud of themselves even for making this tournament. Like that's a genuine compliment from my end.
Yeah, I think the Titans definitely deserve praise, but they do not deserve the like championship title for the Summer Showdown because they've played against some really poor teams, and any poor teams that they've not played against, they've lost to. So, and pretty badly at that. So, I can give credit to Deepe for fixing the team like he did before he even joined any team. He looked at teams like the Titans and the Paris Eternal and said, I've identified some weaknesses. Uh, he would used to say in like these core streams, and he's actually made good on that promise and has actually shown that he still has the caliber to coach in Overwatch 2. So that's something we can appreciate him for. And the players have been doing a phenomenal job, based off of their own skill level. Uh, but that does not make this team an actual top tier team, despite having qualified. Um so at this point, I think the Vancouver Titans should just do their best and have a good time because this is probably the best this team is going to look in this season.
Oh yeah, for sure. And yeah, I think on that note we can move on to the fifth seeded team. Right, the London Spitfire. Now, again, a very like interesting team to talk about. The London Spitfire have made their way in this tournament by having some really fun performances, I will say. I think a lot of credit goes to their unique playstyle of like using May in their Jotes composition. So they've got the standard Junker Queen, Sojourn, Lucio Brig, and in addition to that, they just play Backbone on the May, and because he's like so good at understanding wall placement and things like that, they just end up getting value out of him, like just by playing that strategy on one or two maps per match or per series, I should say. So the Spitfire are a really fun team to watch. They've got that kind of like trash talky fun attitude about them. Like it's just like fun to watch them and wait and see like what they're gonna say at the end of this match. The whole team has got a really like bubbly personality about them. So I think even like personality wise and strategy wise, they're just going to be a team that you would want to see progress as much as possible. Realistically, I do think they can go fairly deep because like they've got a few teams that are significantly worse than them, right? Like they have beaten the Defiant before, for instance, the Justice, the Titans, the Mayhem. You know for sure that they are going to be better than those teams. Like I think they can definitely get up to like the third elimination round or something like that. If you guys look at the playoff bracket, at least off the top of my head, like I think a lot of credit for that is going to go to Sparker, who has been like even though he's not backbone, he has been the backbone of this team in this meta due to Sojourn gameplay. I think he's one of the like more positionally proficient Sojourns out there. Like he always manages to get really efficient angles, which makes him like very quick to land like the first railgun shot in every fight. And I think Admiral and Landon have formed a really solid support duo. Like and naturally they've got the Chaddy playing the Junker Queen, and he's actually quite good at the hero. So all in all, like aside from the fact that they all synergize well together, like they just have a lot of individual talent. So I think even though they aren't like the cream of the crop, they are gonna do well in this tournament.
Yeah, I think the London Spitfire were pretty much made for this comp. All the success you've seen from them has mostly been on, Rhine-based comps, and something that's sort of mirroring GOATs, but in the Overwatch 2 era. So I think when this sort of comp comes in with a lot of tankiness, a lot of team play, and they have to be positionally sound instead of just having really cracked DPS players play overpowered heroes all the time. You can actually see that the London Spitfire is genuinely, uh, they are well practiced and they know how to execute against teams that are not so coordinated. And I think that's just working out very well in their favor. They don't have the explosive potential of some of these other top teams where you've got, insane playmaking DPS. I don't think I would put Backbone or Sparker in that category whatsoever, but they know what their job is and they can get it done. And that's why they've been finding a lot of success. And so props to the London Spitfire on that because, this Hardy is the same Hardy that got absolutely wrecked in his previous time in the Overwatch League. But now he's actually coming in with this new look and really taking the league by like force and, uh, having a really good showing. The other players, Landon is coming in from Collegiate, if I remember correctly, and even he's looking all right. He's not looking, top tier, but he's making obviously the big work, and that's why the team is finding success. So props to a lot of these players that are pretty much underrated, and they're providing a lot of personality to the league, and it's really fun to watch. And they're really competitive as well. And if any team is found, slacking on a particular day, the London Spitfire, with their consistent play and their, well executed strategies, especially in this Jotes comp, they can actually, just pull the rug from underneath the other teams.
Oh yeah, for sure. And like overall, how do you think they compare to like the Toronto Defiant, who are currently ranked just above them at the fourth seed position? Because they did have a match just yesterday, and the Spitfire did beat them, but there's still a lot of debate among the community about like which team is actually better.
I think on a pound for pound basis, if you just look at the individual pieces, I think the Toronto Defiant is better, and they should be better. Uh, but it just feels like the London Spitfire is honestly better coached, and they're working better as a team. And I think that's what the difference maker is, especially in this comp, like I keep saying, uh, because how much of a team play focus there is. I think in any other meta, I think the uh, Toronto Defiant definitely have the upper hand. But in this meta and based off the match that we just saw very recently, the London Spitfire are better for the Summer Showdown. And that's why they're finding success. And the Toronto Defiant are still struggling a little bit, despite being placed a bit higher. I feel like obviously the support line of the Toronto Defiant and Twilight especially, as well as Chorong, uh, are both really good players, and I don't think pound for pound that the support players on the Spitfire can quite match up to them. Uh, that said, the team is working together for the Spitfire, and so they're just playing a whole lot better, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I think in this meta, the Spitfire have been like they've had higher peaks. Like although the Toronto Defiant have had like some really good looks, all in all, like the cohesion of the Spitfire just shows. Like there's no player on the Defiant right now that I would say is exceptional at playing this meta. It's just that you can understand that the team knows the individual roles and is somehow, getting things to work out well for them. But they're not a team that one would expect to make it really deep in this tournament. Like I think even though like they did make it like a decently close game against the Spitfire. Realistically, I don't see them getting too far. So, like, yeah, not much to say about the Refined. All in all, I just find that they're a bit of a boring team to watch in this meta. They've got no unique looks, they've got no unique strategies, they don't have consistent playmakers. Like, I can't believe I'm saying that when Hisu is on the lineup and even Twilight. But yeah, it is what it is, and yeah, unfortunately, I don't think it's going to be a really successful tournament run for them. Um, but yeah, I think we can then move on and talk about our top three seed teams. All right. In third place or third seed, should I say, we've got the Houston Outlaws, and I for one am very excited to see this team. I think they, on their best days in this tournament, have looked like a team that can probably win this tournament. Like they've looked so clean, like thanks to absolutely amazing DPS players in Merit and Pelican. Like they both can just pop off and kill five at in any given team fight. Like it's like a 50-50 chance about like who pops off. I think like Lep and Lastro have also been a very consistent backline. Like Lastro is surprisingly good at playing Brig for a flex support player, and Lep has absolutely been one of the most influential main support pickups I think in this tournament. So all in all, the team is gelling really well. They've had a decently difficult strength of schedule, and they are like just making it work right now. They are not the most consistent team out there. I'll say that much, but I think if there's a dark horse team in this tournament, it is the Outlaws. Do I think they can win the tournament? Probably not. Most probably not. But I think they can like make it to the semi-final match or something like that. It's going to be very fun to see them. Um, I think yeah, there's not a lot to say about this team. It's just like they've got so much pop-off potential among the entire roster that like it just makes them very scary to go up against, even if you know you're a better team. Like even if I were Dallas or the Shock, I wouldn't be 100% confident going in to play the Outlaws right now. Like what do you think, Nightwing?
Yeah, I mean, the Houston Outlaws are definitely sort of a weird creature, to be honest, because they've somehow managed to lose to the London Spitfire and the NYXL, but they've beaten Atlanta Rain and Gladiators. Admittedly, those teams did just drop the spaghetti this particular stage, but still, I mean, it's just kind of weird to look at. Uh, but yeah, the Houston Outlaws definitely have immense DPS talent. I would say it's pretty much comparable with the other top two teams that we've got, uh, like the Shock and Dallas. Like Merit and Pelican are genuinely that good, in my opinion, and obviously that's been awarded to Pelican in particular with the Rookie of the Year awards as well. So that's no surprise, right? Dante is a perfectly serviceable and a pretty good Junker Queen. I'm finally warming up to Lastro playing this Brig as well. I was a little iffy on it earlier, but it seems to be okay. And Lep is all right as well. It's a decent pickup from the Outlaws. But those weird losses, especially to the NYXL, just make me sort of question my will to live, to be honest. And that's one of the things I don't like about Houston is that they just sort of randomly drop the spaghetti all over the floor at times. Uh, but apart from that, I think Houston definitely has the potential to create an upset, honestly. I think while teams like Dallas have been doing good this stage, they definitely faltered in previous stages. So if you see the Battle of Texas happen at some point, you could potentially see Houston coming out with the win, despite however dominant Dallas might look. Just because that's always been this sort of weird matchup where either team can somehow just flip flop and sort of lose randomly. Uh, and I think they can also compete with the Shock. Shock has finally shown themselves to be a little more vulnerable, losing their first match in the regular season. So in that sense, I think the Houston Outlaws can be somewhat competitive. It's just not the likeliest outcome, but there's definitely, I would say, at least maybe a 30-40% chance that the Houston Outlaws do step up and actually take a lot more wins than we expect them to. They might make it to the finals, and they could potentially, though there's only a small chance of this happening, is that they could actually win the Summer Showdown. Uh, Overall, I like what I'm seeing from the Outlaws, but some weird losses have just got me questioning how much I really trust trust this team.
Yep, and I think we can move on to the top two teams and then talk about whom we think is going to win the Summer Showdown in NA. But before we do, guys, just remember to leave your thoughts down in the comments below and leave the video a like if you like our analyses. Alright, let's move on and talk about the top two teams. Alright, let's talk about the second seeded team first, which is the San Francisco Shock. Now, this might be a bit shocking for some of you, because I mean the Shock almost everyone's favorite, right? I know they're Nightwing's favorite, but this tournament they have had a few downs. More downs than we'd expect a team with so many ups to have. They have still been a really good team, but they did like have a relatively easy strength of schedule, with the exception of the Dallas Fuel, obviously, who did end up beating them once. Uh, so all in all, I think the Shock are still like a really formidable team. They are probably like one of the most consistent teams in the NA region, because you always know you're going to get a competitive like fight out of them. I think a lot of that is to be attributed mainly to Proper, who has been like arguably the best Genji in the NA region in this tournament. He's not just good at the mid fight, but also like really consistent with his Dragon Blades, and just has immense pop off potential. And like a surprise second playmaker on the team is actually Violet. Like he's more of a defensive playmaker, but like I feel like his like boops are scarily well timed. Like I was just telling Nightwing and a few of our friends just the other day, like it almost seems like he's been programmed to boop at the right moment. Like almost like using hacks on Lucio. Like the moment you see, like he sees the enemy Junker Queen about to swing with her axe, this guy boops her away. The moment he sees the enemy Genji dashing in with a blade, he boops the Genji away and speeds the team back. Like he's also been a really good Lucio, considering that he's originally a flex support player. So huge props to Violet, and I think him and Proper being so consistent, like being the yin and yang of the team, along with Koluj, who has also been a like fantastic Junker Queen. Honestly, it's a big boon to the roster, and that's one of the reasons why they have been so stellar in this meta. Of course, they still have Kilo, who's like not been as impressive to me. He's a bit of a body shot bandit on the Sojourn, from what I can see, but he does end up hitting those body shots. It's just that like when it's a matter of just either landing a shot and risking dying versus like confirming a kill with a headshot, I would rather confirm the kill, and that's not what I can rely on Kilo to do at the moment. So him and Finn, I say, are probably lacking a little bit, but other than that, it's a solid lineup, and I definitely like believe that they are really strong contenders to make it to the finals. What are your thoughts, Nightwing?
I think obviously the Shock have been beating out every other team apart from the Dallas Fuel, and that's because they have great player quality and great team cohesion. And I mean, I don't even have to say too much about it. I mean, the team is excellent, to be honest. I think the only reason, and I'm going to take these two teams together because they're the final two on our list. The real difference maker, probably the 1% difference that you're going to see between these teams, and why Dallas Fuel can, edge it out most likely against the San Francisco Shock, is because one of the reasons is Fielder. Fielder is somehow just a god of getting ult charge. I don't know how he does it, but he always has more ult charge than the enemy support, no matter which hero is on. Last year it was the Moira. This year you can see the same thing on the Brig. I don't know how he racks up that ult charge so quickly, and he keeps his team just healed up. He's like a doctor with like a MD degree or something, because he's just really good at healing. And I think other people just struggle to match up. That said, I do have to give props to Finn. He's been doing great on the Brig. Violet, like you said, we need to check his game and PC for that, boop hack. I don't know who's making that, but yeah. I think Kilo definitely has been sort of a weak spot for the Shock recently. His Sojourn was never as good as Proper's. Proper has definitely been the better Sojourn out of the two. Sam is just benched, which I'm honestly fine with. The fact of the matter is that Edison was just the better Ash and Sojourn of the day, when the Shock and the Dallas Fuel clashed. And Edison did an exceptional job on some of these maps, almost carrying the entire team, to be honest. I think there's definitely potential for a player like Kilo, who's done, absolutely great in contenders and has been doing exceptionally well in this entire season as well, to sort of clap back in this tournament. I think both of these teams can, take it, but the Shock, are just maybe a little bit behind from the results that we've seen lately. Obviously, one of the teams had to win the match, one of the teams had to lose the match. But there are a few things that the Shock, maybe if they concentrate on, they can actually bridge the gap between them and the Dallas Fuel. And the gap is not that huge. I think on any other given day, the Shock could have also won. So at this point, it's just sort of a coin toss, I feel.
Hmm. So here's my assessment, right? Like you've made some really good points, so I'm just gonna build up on top of that. I do think that Edison is definitely the better hit scan when you compare both the teams. His Ash and Sojourn have like his Ash was scarily good on some points during that match and naturally during other matches as well during these qualifiers. His Sojourn as of late has been really good. So I think he's definitely edging out Kilo in this matchup. But I think that Edison overall is a little bit inconsistent. Like kind of like Kilo, although Kilo is consistent, but he's not like his peak isn't that high, I guess would be the right way of saying it. Edison has got a really high peak, but he's not as consistent. Like one map he'll just not hit anything, and the other map he'll be carrying his team like killing five. Um, so I think that's a bit of an interesting matchup. I don't think it leans heavily towards one or the other. But if Edison plays his peak game, he's definitely above Kilo. Then I think Sparkle versus Proper is like a god tier, like impossible to call matchup because both are some of the best Genjis in the entire world. So I don't think I can call that in any way. I do think Hanbin beats out Koluj in the Junker Queen head to head. Like Hanbin will probably beat out 99% of Junker Queens we pit him up against. Um, no, like no insult to Koluj. I think he's doing a great job as well. Um, Again, fielder, exceptional brig. I think he's edging out Finn by a mile and a half in this meta. So a clear brig advantage to the Dallas Fuel. And as for the Lucios, I'm inclined to say that Violet is the better Lucio just because of all these defensive plays I've been seeing him make. But I think Chio has been playing a more like team-oriented Lucio, so maybe he edges out. So all in all, I think the Dallas Fuel have a higher peak, and they do, I guess, have like a higher chance of winning this tournament. I do also believe they're the more consistent team overall, which is like a surprising statement to make against the Shock, which are undoubtedly one of the most consistent teams in the history of the league. But yeah, I must say that the edges with the Dallas Fuel, although I do think that because the Shock are so good at learning from their mistakes, kind of similar to the Shanghai Dragons, like the Shock make amazing mid-game adjustments as well as like make new game plans against teams that have already beaten them. Like case in point, when they just learned how to beat the Vancouver Titans at Goats in season 2 of the league. Like they've avenged nearly every team that they have lost to. So I think we can still count on this being a really close match. Um, I personally have put the San Francisco Shock as the winners of this tournament in my personal bracket. I'm going for a bit of a like risk with like voting for the underdogs. Seoul over in APAC, the Shock here in NA. But yeah, either way, it's just all good fun, and I think these are going to probably be one of the closest playoffs that we see just because of how unpredictable this comp and this meta is. And yeah, any final words, Nightwing, before we end the discussion?
I think either way, we're in for some great final matches in both regions. I think most likely it's going to be Seoul and Shanghai and Dallas and Shock, but we also have, especially in NA, we have a lot of these surprise contestants now that the Atlanta Reign and LA Gladiators have been given the boot. So you could see some really fun Cinderella runs, dark horse runs, whatever you want to call them, where some of these teams just randomly show up and make it to the semifinals or the finals, which I think is almost more likely than one of the good teams not dropping the spaghetti all over the floor. But I think either way, we're in for a good summer showdown this time.
Oh yeah, I think we are in for a treat either way. Even though the the whole Jotes comp can be a bit of a visual clutter. Like, I mean, I thought they fixed the visual clutter in Overwatch 2, right? What's all this about? But anyway, I think that's all for this video. Thanks a lot for watching, and we will see you on the other side of this tournament, guys. Bye bye.